Hi, and welcome to another episode of More to Advertising here on dailyadbrief.com. I'm your host, Jeff Swartz. I'm excited about my next guest. I get excited about all my guests, but I'm really excited about my next guest. Lexie Major is the CEO of Forward Fertility, which helps families find the best fertility clinics, figure out how much it costs, educates them. And it is currently in seed funding, a startup. So there's a lot of excitement, a lot of changing things right now. So I'm excited to have Lexie on the program. Thanks for being on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Absolutely. And now I think one of the most, I mentioned change because it's a startup and there's always change and flux and
Yeah.
everything, but you're just switching your name to Forward Fertility, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly it. One thing that a good VC friend of mine will say is that when it comes to startups, they think of us like dog years. You're doing everything so fast, you're iterating very quickly, and you're taking on feedback from your customers every single day. And so when we first started, the name of the company was IVF Options, ivfoptions.com. But a growing number of our patients are fertility preservation. So they're wanting to freeze their eggs, which is not actually IVF, or I guess it's the first part of IVF. And so, to support a lot of our patients that are not doing IVF, they're doing preservation, we tried to come up with a name that was a little bit more all encompassing.
Awesome. I love it. And it's smart to do it early on and get that data. And you did it based off of what you're actually doing and how you're growing as well too. So let's even go back a little bit further. What's your journey? Why
Yeah.
how did you come up with this company?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in 2018, I had a scare with cervical cancer. And at that time, I was working in search engine marketing and running major comparison sites for banks and telecommunications companies in Australia. And I know I don't sound it, but I am half Australian. And I went down this rabbit hole of researching fertility preservation and treatment. And I thought it was ridiculous that you could compare basically anything online, like a home loan, a cell phone, a car. But when it came to medical treatment, they weren't going to tell you how much it was going to cost. It was all very hush hush, and you were made to feel like a bad person for asking these doctors how much their treatment was going to cost or how effective they were at actually getting outcomes for their patients. And so I set out to put the power back in the hands of patients. And my very first iteration of the company, I literally built a platform, or not even a platform, I built like a web page on Unbounce. And I personally took all of my research of IVF prices and doctors in Australia, and I put it on there. And I was like, let's just see if it will work. Let's just see if there's other people like me that want access to this information. And they did. And so we grew really quickly into a sort of ZocDoc type model in Australia. But if you're not familiar, Australia market size is about 24 million people. And so it was relatively small. And so I started looking internationally. I looked at China, I looked at Europe, and then I looked at the US in terms of where I could go to expand the business and where I could go to help more patients. And I decided on the United States for a couple of different reasons. I'm very, very happy to be here. So I moved to the US in about 2020, mid COVID, and I partnered with a fertility specialist here, Dr. Ravi Gada, to build IVF options and now Forward Fertility here for Americans.
Awesome. I think it's such a cool story, and you're just getting rolling. You've done a lot already, but you still have such a cool future ahead of you.
Long way to
Now,
go. I
with
know.
the
That's exhausting.
yeah, but it's energizing as well too, right? So
Exactly.
with needing to do all these things and juggle all of this stuff, as well as raising capital and everything else that you need to do, how are you getting the word out? How are you using sweat equity mixed with maybe a little bit of money as well too to actually market yourself?
Yeah. Well, can I ask you something? Are you familiar with Airbnb's strategy, their SEO strategy as a moat?
I am, but share a little bit more.
Sure. So with what we do, and maybe I'll say one other part. So we've kind of pivoted just from price transparency, and we now do pre-cycle testing and telehealth to make it much faster and more affordable for patients to get access to testing, understand what they need, and then find the treatment. But in doing so, one of the questions that I'm getting from a lot of VCs is how defensible is this? If you're not super deep tech, if the software isn't plugged in and in hospital systems, how is this business defensible? And I usually go back to Airbnb's example. They used SEO as a moat and they used SEO as a defense strategy against competitors who are coming into the market. So they ranked position number one on search for over 5 million keywords. So even if a player did come into the market and wanted to compete with Airbnb and they had a really large ad spend or a really large budget, Airbnb is still ranking position number one for 5 million keywords that people are searching for. And I'm sure they're ranking like position number two or page one for millions and millions of other keywords. And so as a result, that makes competing for newer players, it makes it so expensive for them. And it means that their cost of acquisition is going to be high, and their margins are going to be much lower if they're trying to compete with somebody like that. So being first to market and using SEO offensively, I think is really, really interesting. And one of the things that we did, as I mentioned, we started as IVF Options, which is a price transparency platform. And I would explain it to people kind of like Expedia for IVF. So we were first to market, correlating data on prices, success rates, and patient reviews all in one place for people. And as it stands, we're the only website that patients can actually go to in the US to say, how much is IVF going to cost? And because we did that, and because we built out unique content around that, and we've started backlinking on that content, we rank on page one and re-rank in position number one for a ton of keywords where patients are actively looking for not necessarily our services, but they're actively looking for IVF, or they're actively looking for certain doctors or doctors in a certain city. And so we're then reaching those patients at the time of need. Does that make sense, what I'm saying so far?
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I mean, there's a big history, if you look back at some of the major companies in the entire world, of first to market positioning and how much of an advantage that is. So I mean, that's really intelligent, as well as, I mean, luckily you had a good search background as well too, to be able to capitalize on figuring out not only how to be first to market, but also how to get that positioning and claim it.
That's exactly it. And to really capitalize on it, you're right.
Awesome. Well, Lexi, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your strategy. I think it's really fascinating. I think your company is really fascinating as well too. And I wish you all the luck, and I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for watching this episode. If this is something that's hitting close to home for you or someone that you know, definitely go to their assets. We're going to have all of Lexi's information at dailyadbrief.com. And if it's interesting as well on a bigger level, maybe you're someone who's interested in investing in something like this or having that deeper kind of business minded conversation. Again, we'll have a lot of her information and her company's information at dailyadbrief.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate Lexi being on this episode of More to Advertising.
Simplify presents Addressable CTV, combining the power of TV with the targeting and attribution of digital. Simplify's Addressable CTV delivers massive reach with the ability to scale without sacrificing precision. TV buyers can generate incremental reach with household-level targeting, frequency controls, reporting, and insights. To learn more about Simplify's Addressable CTV and what it can do for your clients, visit simply.fi.